Hi everyone, and welcome to Making Addressable CTV a Reality. I'm Michelle Castillo. I'm a senior reporter at Cheddar, and I'll let the panel introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike Piner, and I am the Advanced Media Lead for Mediahub, a full-service creative media planning and buying agency that's part of IPG. And yes, I said creative and media in the same, next to each other in the same time.
It's bold. Hi, I'm Matthew Papa. I'm SVP of Global Partnerships at Capitfy. Capitfy is the world's largest independent search intelligence platform for marketers and media companies.
Hi, I'm Brian Chisholm. I manage partnerships at OpenX. We're one of the largest and original omni-channel programmatic exchanges.
So for the next 20 minutes, we're going to be discussing CTV, its future, and how it can evolve in the next 5 to 10 years. So let's start with Omnicom recently forecasted that CTV spend in the US is going to reach $13.4 billion this year. That's a 50% year over year increase. So what I'm wondering, Matt, let's start with you. Do you still think CTV is an emerging channel?
I mean, I think it's an emerging channel because we don't quite have a grasp on all that is encompassed within the CTV umbrella. We're still trying to define that. You know, recently they've said that they want to move the moniker of OTT into the CTV ecosystem. It's really about defining now about screens and audience and shows all into kind of the same funnel. So CTV is emerging because it's still an open playing field for who's going to own that. And I think we can all agree, like, Google and Facebook are not going to own the rails of CTV, which is excellent, right? It allows for competition and allows for innovation to come through that. So I think it's emerging from a technology perspective, but I think we can agree that the consumer consumption of CTV is certainly no longer emerging. Like, everyone's engaging in it. If you're not, you're just probably not consuming TV, period.
Mike, I have the same question for you. Among your clients, is CTV considered an experimental option, or is it part of the media buy now?
We're making it part of the media buy, part of the regular media buy. So I'd like to say it's not emerging. It's here. It's actually here. It's here today. And I think the pandemic really accelerated the audiences and the ad-supported impressions that are in CTV to reach them, and just the content that we see moving to CTV, the premium content itself, whether it's ad-supported or non-ad-supported, it's here today. So, yeah.
So, Brian, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, Matt had mentioned that they're kind of combining the OTT term into CTV. Are there any misconceptions that are kind of in the marketplace that need to be cleared up?
Programmatic is, I think, always complex. Even for people that have been in it a long time, there's so many acronyms. It's hard, and I think it's even a little bit more complex than the traditional display programmatic ecosystem, where you've got one ad server. Here you've got 3 or 4 ad servers, which I think is great for competition. So I think everybody understanding who owns the supply and the different paths to get to it, I think that's still evolving. I don't think people have perfect knowledge there. So I think that's an opportunity for education.
So I want to take a step back and really talk about the adoption of CTV. We've all heard that during the pandemic, viewing time went up. We're all watching more TV. Do you think that accelerated the need for the connected TV in the homes? We'll start with you.
Yes, absolutely. I think we saw adoption and testing on a massive scale during the pandemic. I think it really, packed 3 years of evolution and what we saw, or what we planned on seeing, into really like 1 year or a year and a half. So yeah, I think there was a lot of adoption, obviously, that took place during the pandemic, and the penetration is there, and the growth in ad-supported impressions again was significant.
And what did you learn about CTV because of this time period that you might not have learned a few years ago?
I think that, what I learned from a consumer perspective is that there's an extraordinary amount of content out there that's accessible, that has a very poor ecosystem of discovery, right? There's a lot of disparate technologies. There's a lot of very, terrible ways to discover CTV. But then the hardwares, the OEMs, are really working to bring to light the valuable CTV content that's really going to drive forward an ad-supported, video on demand model that ultimately we kind of need to buttress the subscriptions. And then from a technology perspective, what I realized is that, like, this is a huge transformation. We're moving from like I said, buying exclusively on shows, or Mike was saying before how we buy exclusively on shows, typically with TV, it's now an attention economy, right? Like we're building a currency around attention, and we're trying to compute how many hours in a day the average American has to commit to content consumption, and then these media companies, which are pouring literally tens of billions of dollars into building that content, are striking just for the some sort of meaningful market share. So it's it's been a very interesting change agent to the way that TV is looked at.
We were actually talking a little bit about this earlier before the panel, this idea that measurement across all TV channels has to be readdressed. Netflix recently in their earnings had mentioned they're no longer going to count based on number of people viewing a program, but the number of viewing hours, just showing the changing ways we're measuring advertising a success of a television show, let alone the success of an advertising campaign. A lot of people have called for measurement to be addressed on CTV. Just wondering where you stand on that.
Yeah, no, I think so. It's a great topic to talk about, and a hot topic certainly. And I think standardized measurement across channels and screens, is needed and will be needed in the future. But I think there needs to be multiple forms of measurements and ways to transact, so you can enrich sort of a standard bottom line measurement, right? Standardized measurement that kind of level sets everything. So I think there needs to be multiple options, and it also enables us to evolve in how we measure things and how we measure effectiveness of ads. So I think we need that openness as well to evolve and innovate.
Brian, wanted to ask you about the measurement question, which I think is the top of mind for a lot of marketers right now.
Sure. From our position as a tech provider, I think what we want to do is provide as much detail ultimately to the marketers through the bid stream, so that they can measure however they want to measure. So, providing log level exposure data and IDs in there, those are things that we think it's our job to facilitate, so that folks like Mike and his teams can measure what's happening, what's the benefit of that campaign.
Isn't that the biggest benefit to kind of now merging these ecosystems like CTV, advanced linear TV, is that this kind of consumer discovery across the entire funnel, locating users in different environments, is obviously what's going to kind of underpin how we look at measurement. And I think what's most frustrating that I've noticed is that the marketer defines measurement, right? Like it's the marketer's job to define what measurement is to them. And it feels like we were never having these conversations with them to come to some sort of agreed upon tonic of measurement between both the media companies, the technology providers, and now the marketers. And we're in a huge inflection point when it comes to measurement. I mean, poor old Nielsen, but they just got a nasty black eye, and it's an opportunity to create disruption, right? And the amazing part about all this is that the people that are disruptors here, these media companies, independent tech providers, and marketers, they've all been incumbents in this market for years. They're multi-billion-dollar businesses. It really presents an opportunity to create something new that everyone can agree on. I imagine, Mike, that you guys are thinking about that at Mediahub. Literally, are you gonna get tattooed on your back once they finally describe what measurement is?
100%. I mean, yeah, this is a great topic and a hot topic, like I said. But I think in our mind, measurement, we see it moving to the front of the bus in the process, in the media planning and buying process, right? Which is typically all about defining your audience, defining your consumers, planning against those audiences and those consumers, right? Pulling it through to activation and then measuring, right, the results in different ways and optimizing it. But it's been in the back, so I think it actually needs to move to the front in this conversation, where you're just measuring what you've already been doing historically. Whether you think that's right or wrong, to kind of really start to optimize right away, because you'll find out what has been working, what not has been working. You need to know where you've been to understand where you're going, in other words.
Brian, but is addressability even possible in today's CTV environment? Is that a true possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. One of the huge benefits of this CTV ecosystem is it has much more durable identifiers than desktop. Right? There's not the concern of the third-party cookie going away, and those identifiers are helping make that media addressable. Right? We have, I think, 50 million addressable CTV devices in our graph. It's there, that will grow for sure, and I think that's just one of the real values that's driving not just CTV consumption for consumers, but the advertising business portion of it forward.
And how are you guys seeing a compromise between addressability and scale when you're looking at this? especially for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a compromise, it's about a balance, right? I think that's it, and that's everything in media. There are so many options in media today, so it's really about finding the right balance that's going to get you to your goals. And one of the things that we hear from our advertisers, our marketing, our partners today is that, is really, if we see a brand campaign, and we love brand campaigns, come down, typically, what is the goal, and expecting it to be a brand lift goal, but it's always the same answer today, and it's just the reality that we face, that a brand campaign also needs to halo down to performance and short-term results. So balancing long-term brand lift with short-term business results, and that's just a reality. It may seem unfair, but that's just a reality. And so by balancing these two tactics, that you have at your disposal, addressable combined with mass reach, traditional TV tactics, that's where you can actually end up doing both at once and get the best performance.
Brian, I see you nodding along.
Yeah, I remember, Mike, when we talked earlier, you talked about that there's sort of a hybrid approach, right, of getting sort of the program targeting and understanding the content, but then also overlaying data, right? That combination is driving really great results for you guys, and I think that's it's the maximum use of data is from any source, I think, is what's going to drive success.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the difference is a traditional TV advertiser or TV marketer approaches it from a content-first perspective. I think that's really important because it's actually worked, like focusing on that high-quality premium content that reaches your audience that they're passionate about, right, that they can't live without. I mean, I think that's really important. And CTV, generally speaking, to start, has approached it from a digital-first perspective, which is an audience-first perspective and a performance perspective. So I think CTV is where those two things really come together. Those two approaches, those two strategies, and what we've seen is when you do both together, that's what really gets the best results.
So on that wavelength, Matt, I have a question. How do you balance program-based buying versus audience-based buying? Like, how is it shifting, and what are the pros and cons of each?
Program-based buying isn't going anywhere. That will always exist as long as there's live news, live sports, premium content that's being delivered in both a linear format and a CTV format. That will always exist. The audience-based buying is about understanding the new signals of identity, right? The addressability is the anchor identity. That's allowing a marketer to define the audience that they're looking for, and then take more macro type models and kind of build this center of gravity around that addressability, and then use that from an audience-based buying perspective. Like, they are not, like, you don't have to do just one or the other, right? You can enrich the concept of program-based buying with a data-driven focus around your audience tactics. And I think that's where the agencies and the brands are starting to find a really interesting, fidelity internally, is they're bringing their TV teams into digital, and they're bringing their digital teams into TV, and those teams are communicating with each other, and they're building entities and subject matter experts to help make sure that these budgets that largely didn't talk to each other before are now speaking to each other to be efficient, right? Like, media waste is the biggest problem at the agency level, and their brands hate that. So how do we get beyond this world of media waste and do the data-driven buying that they love in digital, while also creating a great consumer experience, right? We can't just be punch drunk on data and have a shitty consumer experience like what's happened with digital, right? Like, the digital advertising experience is garbage. And if that's what ends up in CTV, then we're going to be having this conversation 2 years from now of oh, well, how do we do this for linear, and how do we do this for something else? We can't just keep trying to reinvent the wheel to create a better consumer experience. If we're going to do data, we have to have a better consumer experience.
100%, and I would go further and say the linear TV experience isn't so great right now either.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
If you've tuned into cable TV lately. So, I think we can do better in the CTV space and on that screen, with just high impact ads, ad innovation. I think there's a lot going on there right now, and I think we've only scratched the surface.
Following along those lines, Mike, what do you think the whole ad tech industry needs to know and needs to do to further address the needs of the marketers who want to be in CTV?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ad tech industry really understands CTV and the power of it and the power of the ad serving technology that's behind it, right? But I think the ad tech industry, and we're seeing this movement happen today with some of the people that are now being hired in ad tech coming from TV and broadcast and cable TV, because that business model that was created was incredibly successful, right? And so I think taking and injecting some of that into CTV, into ad tech, is much needed. And I think I see that happening to balance both of these worlds and take what works on both sides, what works in digital and what's worked historically in TV, and bring them together on the screen.
Capitfy and OpenX have been working on this for the past year, which is literally built around the concept of data in and data out. Yep. And it doesn't just have to be like performance-based data, right? It can be ad exposure data. It can be tied to our search uplift data around, consumer behaviors. And these are, anonymous points of data that can be used by both marketers and media companies. Somehow programmatic has disintermediated the conversation between the marketer and the media company in traditional digital for display and OLV. That gap has become wider and wider and wider, and it's become really contentious in the middle. Arguing about fees, shadow fees in the exchange. How do we get beyond that? Like ad tech, independent ad tech, and OpenX does a phenomenal job of this, of working with these large media brands to create that connective tissue to the marketer through technology to where everybody feels like they're participating in the transaction is just so paramount in this inflection point, because that $14 billion is only going to be spent if the marketer feels like they're getting value of the media company feels like they're getting value with the marketer, and that independent ad tech is playing a privacy-first, data-centric, and efficient role in the transaction.
Brian, same question. Do you feel that a lot of agencies like yours are ready to address the needs of marketers at this time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the traditional programmatic ecosystem has built up, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of marketers who have experienced buying programmatically, and I think they've proven out that that's a way they want to buy. And there's no doubt that that's the way they're going to buy a lot of CTV, maybe not all of it, but a lot of it. So I think the basic components are there, and then we're in a position to start adding more sophistication there. We're excited about what we're doing with Capitfy and being able to take different data sets and make them easily addressable without there being additional ad tech tax in the middle there to drive outcome for buyers. That's where we're focused.
I just wanted to remind the audience that if you guys have any questions, feel free to submit them online. We can see them here. We're towards the end of our panel, but would love to hear from you guys if you have any questions. So back to the discussion. How are you currently buying CTV, Mike? Are you buying it as a percentage of programmatic? Are you guys buying it direct?
Both, actually. So we're buying it programmatically, we're buying it direct. And there's no doubt that more of it and more inventory is moving to programmatic, and that is going to continue to grow. But the largest portion is actually coming from direct, and there is a lot of budgets moving from linear over to CTV and being bought directly.
So speaking of the budgets moving over, Matt, do you feel that CTV is a digital buy or is it a TV buy?
I mean, it's a TV buy right now, and it should be a TV buy right now because that's where the technology efficiencies are. But again, the merging of those two worlds is happening, and the digital teams are working with the TV teams to make these buys more efficient, to understand the players in the space that the TV teams may not be familiar with, of who's driving value there. I think, at some point in time, there's not going to be those disparate teams. They're just going to be buying teams at the agency, and you're just going to have an omni-channel approach to buying display, OLV. I mean, it's all coming through the internet, so it's like kind of a joke anyways, but like we're going to get to that point. So,
Brian, how are you guys seeing it at OpenX? Are you seeing it as TV or digital?
From our perspective, I think it's digital. Most of all the buyers that buy through OpenX's programmatic platform are really digital first buyers. I think people are going to come from different angles, right? There'll be pure digital first marketers who are coming at it from a digital standpoint. There'll be more traditional offline marketers who come from that direction. whether there ends up being any one dominant player or force there, I don't know. My guess is that it'll be a little bit fragmented. There'll be different groups that own different budgets, just like in offline.
I think we saw a lot of budgets, especially during the pandemic at Capitfy. We saw a lot of budgets push into CTV from OLV due to scarcity of inventory or scarcity of premium inventory on the internet, right? Like, you go to a premium media company like Condé Nast and they'll tell you, like, you want to buy pre-roll on my property, it's like a $50 CPM and you have to buy it in an upfront. So like, okay, all right, I could just go buy programmatically on CTV and get someone on a big screen and pretty much get the same level of data-driven targeting that I'm looking for. So I think, Brian makes a great point around the digital teams are buying more CTV because they're thinking about it as part of their video budgets. Right. It's not as bifurcated as it once was.
Premium video, not just
premium
CTV.
Video,
right?
which is really difficult to come by on the open web. There's not a lot of premium video.
People don't talk about that enough, but it's definitely true. It's like there's just not a lot of true pre-roll inventory on a premium publisher site. What's there gets sold out so fast that CTV is now, a release valve for some of that
YouTube and
budget.
Vimeo and a handful of other places, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Ryan, when you guys look at when teams are buying CTV, how are you looking at deduplication across the different channels from CTV to linear and direct and programmatic?
I think it's our job to present ad opportunities to buyers. That's the role we play in the marketplace. Enhance it with data as much as we can, and then the buyers and their platform make a lot of those decisioning. So we're a little bit out of the loop on that front, Michelle. But we want to, present the opportunities, enhance them, and make sure we're passing on whatever data we can, and then let the machines and the people that are controlling them make the decisions.
So we have a couple questions from the audience. I want to start with one from Tiffany. What's driving the increases in CTV in programmatic buying over direct? We'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the addressability of it, right, and the audience-first nature of it, I think is, and it coming from performance budgets and the growth in performance-based budget and performance-based advertising, I think, is growing the budgets in programmatic and CTV largely.
And how big will the long tail be in CTV?
Take that one.
Yeah, sure. I think, I don't know how much appetite people have to download 100 different apps on their TV or their device to get the content. It seems like there's a role of some of the fast players, like a Pluto TV, for instance, one of our partners, to add channels for some of those guys. So I think you'll see some of that maybe long tail content get into the ecosystem that way. I don't know from the app standpoint, if we're going to have 100 apps on our TV that we browse and use.
Yeah, I think actually you mentioned FAST, and that's an acronym maybe not everybody knows, but Free Ad-Supported Streaming TV. We have an acronym for everything in media, but I think that experience, that kind of stress-free experience of those apps, right, being able to just like drop in and you're in like a TV-like experience was like kind of one of the surprises of CTV and like the growth of those that you wouldn't expect, because you think of sort of like a Netflix type content aggregator or Hulu, all the growth there, but there is like a significant amount of impressions to be had in those apps, and people are liking them, and then it comes to like the experience, like that stress-free lean back experience of those.
There's a psychological benefit to that, and they've tested it in France. Netflix delivers linear TV through the Netflix app in France, so that's content that's just delivered to you. You don't really get to pick. It's just what happens 24 hours a day. Like, people like being told what to do sometimes. Like Discovery on Netflix, you'll spend more time trying to figure out what to watch than you actually will watch it. And I think that what Brian makes is a great point. Like, premium CTV content providers just plugging into a Fubo, a Pluto, a Tubi, a Zumo, those are really great ways of aggregating but delivering discovery in real time through one interface that's ad supported and free, which I think we can all agree a lot of the market wants something that's ad supported and free. We've reached a little bit of a saturation point with streaming services of subscription based. We've like ad supported media is going to make a roaring comeback.
My sister-in-law can't afford any more accounts for me to log into, so you got to go fast.
Yeah, she had to draw the line somewhere. That's where it was.
So another question from the audience: how are you measuring the short-term business outcomes? A lot of marketers don't like high CPMs without any ability to track goals.
I'll let Mike take that one.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is an area where you have, that is growing tremendously, but, cross-screen, cross-channel attribution, right? And I think there's a ton of partners in the space. It's growing, it's highly competitive, but there's a lot of good work being done deduplicating, audiences across screen and tying exposure to an action, right? And I think, that is really exciting, the ability to do that, and it's evolving fast and growing.
So we're going to have to leave it there today. Thanks so much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your advertising week.